Hi, I want to talk to you today about something called the ME profile. And this is a really important thing to grasp in understanding why it is that you've become ill. Because I think one of the worst parts of when you first crash, you become ill with chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia, long COVID, is that sense of nobody can explain to you why. You've got this weird collection of symptoms that come and go. And there can be a sense of being really isolated, cut off, and the people around you don't understand, they don't get it. Well, the ME profile is a description of the sort of people, the type of people who develop chronic exhaustive conditions. And it's been developed over the last 15 years within the Chrysalis Effect online program. And it's a pattern that I see really powerfully every day in my clients. And it's also something that I recognised in myself when I was recovering from fibromyalgia. And being able to see that pattern, recognise it in yourself, can help to overcome that sense of isolation and confusion and not being understood, knowing that there are other people out there who are like you, for there to be this profile that has been recognised. And once we have this profile, it gives pointers to what is it in your life that has contributed to you being so overwhelmed that you've tipped over into this illness. But also a sense of hope for the future is that if we can understand it, we can begin to unpick some of those characteristics and change things to help resolve your symptoms. This is an approach that really gets to the roots of your symptoms. What is underpinning them? What was happening that overwhelmed your mind and your body? Rather than looking at it as a collection of symptoms where we're just trying to get rid of the symptom, almost like a game of whack-a-mole. Something pops up and so you do something to try and get rid of the symptom, and then you move on to the next one and then the next one, rather than thinking what's really at the root of all this. So the ME profile, there are 5 main trends that we see in people with chronic exhaustion, all of which also describe me. The first of these is the type A personality. And by this, I don't mean necessarily the high-flying executive, the career person. It's just somebody who is really driven in all areas of their life. And there is a sense that nothing you do is ever quite enough, so you've got to do more. So yes, we do see quite a lot of people who are high flyers in the career that they've chosen, who work very, very long hours, for whom work really dominates their thinking and their day. But we also see that same drive to achieve in people who haven't had a career because they've put it into caring for the people around them. So it may be that you're an informal carer and you haven't had a career because you are so focused on making sure that you are there for your children, or maybe for your parents, or in many cases both. Sometimes we see people who've gone into the caring professions, and again we see this drive of nothing is ever quite enough. You've got to be always doing something, trying to get on to the next level. Sometimes we see it coming out in exercise, which is really interesting. So during the period around the pandemic, there was a lot of people saying, but I am a really fit, healthy person. Why have I got long COVID? But what they were also describing is a long period in the run up to having COVID where they had driven their body absolutely to the limits and beyond. So we see people who are in the gym every day, people who run marathons, people who don't just go for a jog, but they will go for miles and miles. Again, this underlying sense of it's never quite enough. And in that context, there can be a belief that I'm not fit enough, therefore I've got to try harder. So the more the body struggles, the more they've been exercising, until sadly many people reach something like the COVID trigger, or it can be something else, which tips them over into a state where their body just cuts out and says, no more. So that's the type A personality. And what to take from that is just that sense of really being driven. The second pattern we see is we call the highly sensitive person. And this is based on the work of somebody called Elaine Aron. And there's been scientific research which has shown that something like 20% of the population have a gene, which means that the way their nervous system works, they take in a lot more information from the surrounding environment than other people. And then they process it more deeply. And that takes an awful lot of energy, but it also exposes them to things that other people just don't experience. So they're often very empathic, so they will find themselves taking on other people's feelings. But it may be that you are extremely sensitive to something like smell. So are you the sort of person who walks through a department store holding their nose like I am? Because smells can just be overwhelming. It might be that you're very sensitive to foods or to sounds, and that you've never really liked being in loud, busy places, have tried to avoid those places. And this is something that tends to actually ramp up and get worse as we get ill. We become more and more sensitive. But at its root, it's just a basic genetic difference. And as sensitive people, we live in a world where we're expected just to be able to tough it out and cope with all of that stuff that's coming at us all the time. And so it may be that we actually pile on the pressure by trying to pretend that everything's okay when it's really not. The third element that we see an awful lot of is having very high expectations of yourself. So really being a perfectionist. And in the early phases when you're younger, it may be something that you actually take a huge pride in, is that you are the person who gets things done, who always says yes and then follows through. You're reliable. It can come through, because we see so many women with these illnesses particularly, in a perfectionism in the roles that you're trying to carry out. So imagining if you are a young mum and you are coming up to your child's first Christmas, having this really powerful urge that everything about it has to be absolutely perfect and planned and under your control, and a background sense that if it's not, everything's going to collapse and something awful will happen, that you've got to be perfect for your child. We can also see it in, again, coming back to carers, a sense amongst nurses that you've got to absolutely get everything right. You've got to be on top of things, because otherwise something awful will happen. That might apply to looking after your parents. It might be part of that drive to do your work absolutely to the best of your ability and work long hours. You have such high expectations, there is just no possibility of your failing, because that just feels so awful. The fourth element is that we see people who very much live in their heads, intellectualizing things, trying to solve problems and understand so that they can get a sense of control and do something about the problems. We see people who spend a lot of time very anxious about the future, trying to predict what's going to happen, and to plan ahead for it and worrying about it, but also spending a lot of time in the past ruminating on what they did and what they said and what they've got wrong, or maybe what other people have said and done to them, and it's very hard to let go. And the upshot of this is that you spend a large part of your life in your head, projecting into the future, looking back into the past. You're never really connected to where you are here and now. And it's the here and now that can give you a sense of safety. So this sort of living in your head can put you into a constant sense of fight or flight, of anticipating or looking back on danger, which puts a huge strain on your body, especially if you've been doing it for years and years and years. And then the final element that we see a lot of is people will talk about feeling like a fish out of water or a square peg in a round hole. So a sense that you don't fit in this world, that there is something maybe slightly wrong with you, and that you have to try and adapt. You have to be the person that other people want you to be in order to be able to survive sometimes, but to get rid of this awful feeling of not being enough. And again, that can often connect back into that type A personality. Nothing is ever enough. So we have these 5 elements of the ME profile that we just see again and again and again in different variations. We have the type A personality, highly sensitive person, high expectations of yourself, living in your head and feeling like a fish out of water. One of the really important things about grasping that there is this profile and recognizing if that you fit into it anywhere is that it's not a fixed personality. It's not inevitable that you have to be ill. What it does is it gives clues as to what you might work on, what can be changed in order to lift the stress that you're putting on your body and that you've probably been living with since you were a very small child. So it opens hope. It gives you a sense that there are other people out there who are like me, who have been through this. People like myself who very much fit these categories, but have managed to come through chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia or whatever to the other side. It's possible to live a healthy life. So I hope this has been helpful, and I'm going to be making more videos which will explore in a bit more detail some of these elements of chronic exhaustive conditions. If you found this video helpful, please do click on like below and subscribe to my channel. You might also like to hop across using the links to my Facebook or LinkedIn pages where you'll find much more content.